join our Zoom, but I know it is noontime and lunchtime for many, and I'd like to kind of get our presentation going. So welcome. I am Stephanie Worthley. I am the K through 12 Guidance Department Chair, and I'm really thrilled that we were able to do this today. I feel like there is a lot of unknowns this school year, a lot of things happening. I know we've been back for a few weeks now, getting ready to have students in the building. Teachers are here, but we are certainly missing the kids. And so we're really excited to be able to offer this today. I know with everything else that we are preparing for the school year, there is an added level of, I don't want to say anxiety or worry, but just another thing for our seniors to do, which is the college application process. So we've been working the past few weeks to gather as much information as we can for you all today. So that way we can get this information to you even before school starts, get you thinking about some things that have to happen over the next couple weeks. And just kind of start to prepare for what's to come over the next couple months for your sons and daughters. So hopefully at this point in time, everybody's familiar with who their guidance counselor is. I work with students, last names through BL. Mrs. DeLuzio is new to our office this year, though not entirely new to Medfield. Mrs. DeLuzio covered for one of Mrs. Mahoney's maternity leaves 2 years ago. So she's familiar with many of you students and parents. So we're really excited to have her back. And Mrs. DeLuzio works with students, last names BO through G. Students H through L work with Mrs. Lodge, M through Q, Mrs. Patton, R through Z, Mr. Ornberg. So please bear with us today as we kind of go through this webinar. You know, Zoom and technology is what it is. It's not perfect. And so if we have any technology difficulties or issues, just bear with us. We do have a plan B. I feel like there's always a plan B now in place, so not to worry. We do have a full agenda for you today as well. We want to talk about kind of the roles and responsibilities of everybody going through this process. We do want to talk about COVID and some of the things we're hearing from our friends at the college level, from College Board. We want to talk about virtual visits and how to access admissions counselors. We really want to get into the nuts and bolts of the application process, talk about Naviance, how to connect Common App and Naviance and what that looks like, how to go about requesting transcripts be sent to the colleges that you're applying to, go over teacher recommendations and guidance counselor recommendations, how to request those and what that looks like, and then some just miscellaneous information related to Common App, admissions deadlines, NCAA, and so forth. So a lot of information for you folks today and a full agenda. But as we go through this information, and especially over the next couple months, we really want you to lean on your guidance counselor. That's what we're here for. You have a very experienced group of guidance counselors in our office that have been doing this for many, many years. And I think each year is a little bit different, especially this year. A lot of this is new to us as well. We're trying to streamline our process as best we can with the with what's in place, you know, with having our students here hybrid, with the technology that we have and everything. So we're really trying to streamline this process. So it's really important that we work together. With that, I'm going to share my screen. We do have a PowerPoint to share with everybody today. So as we go through, as I said, kind of our agenda for today. Sorry. So as we go through this process, I want everybody to just think about how this is a group effort, how communication is really key in this process. There will be parts of the application process that is the student's responsibility, part guidance counselor responsibility, part teacher responsibility. And to make all of this happen and come together, the main thing that we need from students and parents is open and clear communication. When students send out applications to colleges, they are responsible for the actual application, the application fee for essays. You folks are also responsible for sending any SAT or ACT score to colleges. We do not send that along with your transcript. Guidance counselors are responsible for sending out transcripts. They write letters of recommendations for all of our seniors. And then we put something together called the Medfield High School School Profile. Every high school has a profile which kind of goes over information about their own school. So oftentimes, if you're applying to a school in the Midwest or down south or something that may not be as familiar with Medfield High School, you may wonder how they will find out information about our school, and that will be included on our school profile. So that goes out to all colleges that a student applies to. And then the teacher's responsible for sending their own letter of recommendation. And we're going to talk about this a little bit further in the program. But all of these things don't have to happen at the exact same time. So we may even have students that have already submitted an application, or if you submit an application in a couple weeks, but your guidance materials aren't sent yet, that's totally fine. You submit your materials when you're ready, communicate with your guidance counselor and your teacher. We will get everything there in the timely fashion by your deadline to make sure that your application file is complete before an admissions counselor sits down to review it. So as I said, as we go through this process, it's really important that we communicate openly and make sure that we're all on the same page. For some students, they are regular visitors to the guidance office, and that's great. And there are other students that may have popped in once or twice over their 3 years so far in high school, and that's fine too. But I would imagine over the next couple of weeks, it's going to be really important to find some time to work with your guidance counselor to make some appointments, probably virtual Zoom appointments, but just so that way we can make sure that we're all on the same page moving forward.
Hi everyone, I'm Amanda Patton. I'm going to talk a little bit about how COVID has impacted the college admissions process. So I think it's important to know that all college admissions counselors understand that this has had an impact on every single one of their applicants. Never have they been more interested in better understanding the context of every individual applicant. So understanding how this has all impacted their ability to access their curriculum as they normally would, participate in extracurriculars as they normally would. They really are taking a holistic approach to how they are reviewing their applications because they know that this has had an impact in a variety of different ways. We've included the link below in this PowerPoint if you wanted to take a look, but this is a statement that 300 college admissions deans wrote about what they find most important in their applicants. So 5 different values that they highlight throughout this application process. The first is self-care. So they are really promoting the self-care in all of their applicants, recognizing that this has been challenging, making sure that, you're taking care of yourself. They understand that a lot of students may have found, the remote learning, the being isolated from family and friends and educators very challenging. So, understanding that self-care is important, promoting that, and maybe that's something you reflect on in your application if needed. They talk a bit about academic work. So I'm going to read actually a quote directly from the statement. They say that no student will be disadvantaged because of a change in commitments or a change in plans because of this outbreak. Their school's decisions about transcripts, the absence of AP or IB tests, their lack of access to standardized tests, or their inability to visit campus. So they've really made this claim that they don't want this to be a disadvantage to anyone. And I think that's important to remember as you go through this process. The third value they highlight is service. I think that during this time, there have been ways that students and applicants have been having to support others, maybe within their family or friends who are having a hard time. So kind of reflecting on during this time, if there's any ways, excuse me, there's a fly buzzing around me, that's why I'm going like this. But there have been a variety of different ways that students have had to care for others in their family or friends who are having a hard time and supporting others. And they really value, service and helping your community in some way, big or small. Family contributions. So I think this is really important. A lot of students have had to care for younger siblings, maybe help them with their virtual learning if both parents are working, for example. So highlighting those experiences as well. An application is something that is valuable if you've had those experiences. And lastly, just remembering that when it comes to extracurricular activities and summer activities, they understand that it's possible that those didn't happen this summer or didn't happen last spring. And there's no expectation that your extracurriculars looked as they did in previous years. I think it's just a matter of really reflecting on how you spent your time during this shutdown and what meaning you found. Next slide. There is an option on the Common Application to talk about how COVID-19 has impacted you. So it's a short opportunity, 250 words, where you can reflect on this. So when you're trying to think about what you might want to share, if there were certain obstacles you faced, for example, issues with internet or not having a quiet space to work, or perhaps your mental health was kind of getting in the way of your ability to do your work, it gives you an opportunity to reflect on that directly in the Common Application. Mr. Ornberg always says that optional equals opportunities. So this question is optional. You don't have to fill it out, but I do think it's worth taking a moment to share a little bit about what this has been like for you. And certainly if there have been major obstacles that you're sharing here, make sure that you're sharing that with your guidance counselor in the counselor recommendation form that we'll talk about a little bit later, because that's something we'll want to highlight as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Elise DeLuzio. So our virtual college rep visits, we're really thrilled to be able to offer these. It's a little bit of a change for us. In past years, we've had reps come into the building and we've had students sign up to meet with them during our reading periods. Since that's not possible this year, we're really happy that we've been able to pivot and move these to be virtual. So as of, I think we last checked the number this morning, we had 95 colleges registered to meet with our students, and we're going to hold the visits starting at 2 o'clock, so 2:20, and 2:40. We thought that it would be good to give students the chance to get home from school, eat some lunch, get comfortable, and settle in before the visit. And students can sign up for these visits through Naviance, so they just log in and select, they can see the list of all of our 95 schools signed up, select which ones they'd like to attend. And these are a really great opportunity. Typically, the admissions representative that does visit the high school is the same one who also reads our students' applications. They're assigned to us as their geographical area often. So it's a really nice chance not only for you as students to learn more about the school, ask any questions, but also for the admissions rep to put your name and face together and kind of keep an eye out for your application.
Hi folks, welcome back. My name is Eric Ornberg. I think we may have buried the lead here with this information, but we did try to get this out to folks yesterday in the newsletter that the October 3rd SAT here in Medfield has been canceled. The good news is we feel like our option B, the SAT school day, which is something that will be provided to all seniors at Medfield High School. So even if you haven't registered for the October, if you have been bounced around from test site to test site, all you'll need to do now is visit the APT website below to register. You don't have to register through College Board. When you fill out your answer sheet on October 14th, that will be your registration. So we think that this option for our kids really closes the equity gap. It does provide an opportunity for every senior to take the SAT with essay or the SAT without essay on October 14th. That being said, there was about a dozen Medfield kids that had signed up for the subject test. Some of you have reached out. There is an opportunity to try to switch test centers for the subject test in October. You can also reach out to College Board about transferring that money towards a November sitting if need be. And again, we will have a plan in place for the cohorts to be tested on separate levels of the school. In the meantime, we're asking folks to register ahead of time so we can get a head count for October 14th. and then we'll provide more information as that test day gets closer.
Piggybacking on what Mr. Ornberg was just saying, I'm Mrs. Lodge, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about that testing piece. We're so happy that we're going to be able to offer the SAT to Medfield students, but I want to just assure families that, like Amanda had shared earlier, that there obviously have been a lot of implications to the admission process as a result of COVID, and standardized testing is certainly one of those areas. You might have heard probably in the news or as you've been researching some schools about some colleges that are going test optional or going test blind. And I just wanted to reassure families that if your son or daughter or students, for those of you who are listening, if you choose not to take the SAT or the ACT, or you choose to take the SAT and the ACT, but you're not happy with your scores, for the most part, that's going to really be okay in this process. There are many, many schools, as you see on the slide, over 1,400 schools across the United States that have moved to a test optional policy for this year. Really just feeling like students haven't had the same access with canceled test sites all throughout the spring and the fall. Students haven't had the opportunity to test the way that they might have in a typical admissions year. So the National Association of College Admission Counselors, or NACAC, has actually put together this pledge that over 1,400 colleges have signed on to, really making a definitive statement that they will not include test scores in admission decisions for this current year. Many times as families are looking through test optional schools in any given year, they're sort of wondering, well, does optional actually mean really strongly recommended? But in this case, colleges really, really are signing on saying that optional truly, truly does mean optional. Along those same lines, there are some schools that have actually gone sort of one step beyond test optional, and they're calling themselves test blind. And they're saying that they really will not review any standardized test scores. They don't even accept those standardized test scores. There's about 60 colleges that are test blind versus test optional. It's a little bit of a nuance on the terminology. Most of those schools tend to be in the Midwest and on the West Coast, the UC system, and then Dickinson and Hampshire a little bit closer to home. But we want to certainly reassure families that if you don't have the opportunity to test, that's okay. I had the opportunity to attend a webinar recently that was put on actually by Dartmouth College. And I just wanted to highlight this one quote because I think, coming from the mouths of the admission officers is really important for you to hear. And the Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid there at Dartmouth, Lee Coffin, was really sharing that optional is not a trick word. Sort of, if you read this bolded statement here, it's a clear response to an unprecedented moment that requires admission officers to reimagine some of the elements we have historically required as we reassure anxious students about their upcoming applications. So just to keep all of this in mind as you do go through the testing process. So with those sort of important pieces behind us, we wanted to talk a little bit more now about the nuts and bolts of the application process and what it actually looks like for students as you begin to walk through moving from building your list to actually applying to schools, what we require on our end, and from you guys as well. So one of the first things that we asked students to do is, in order to sort of prepare your materials to be sent, is we want to make sure that everyone has actually created a common application account. It's an easy thing to do if you haven't done it yet. It's www.commonapp.org. Very easy to register as a first-year student. And then one of the first things that we ask students to do, you don't have to go through the whole application right now and complete all sections, but in the education section, all you have to do is indicate that you attend Medfield High School. Quick, easy step. And you have to add one college that you're planning on applying to, or think you'll be planning on applying to, in the My Colleges tab. Once you've done that, you'll be able to go through what's called the FERPA release authorization. So that's the Family Educational Rights Privacy Act. And that will allow us to be able to move forward with your application. When we send out this PowerPoint, you guys are going to have access to all of these links, and that FERPA release authorization actually brings you to a little video that talks about it. But essentially, FERPA is asking you to answer some questions about whether or not you will allow your high school to release your records to the colleges that you're applying to through Common App. And then from there, it asks students whether or not they're willing to waive their rights to view their letters of recommendation after they've enrolled at an institution. So it's a question that we discuss with students every single year, whether or not students should waive or should not waive their rights to view the letter of recommendation. And it's our recommendation to students that they do waive their rights to view those letters of recommendation. And we recommend that for a number of different reasons. We recommend that because it sort of shows that good faith effort in your teachers and your counselors who've asked to write letters of recommendation, that you trust them to write a letter that's going to support you. And sort of rest assured, that's what we're all looking to do in this process anyway, is to support you moving forward and in getting to that next step. But in addition to that, it also signals to the college that the recommendations that they're receiving are really candid and truthful letters of recommendation and ones that they can rely upon. We have had feedback from colleges over the years that if they see that a student has not waived their rights to view their letter of recommendation, that they don't always take that letter of recommendation into account because they don't know how trustworthy that it is. So that is something that we do recommend, but we're happy to have individual conversations with students if you have questions about it. And then once you do that, those are just quick little Common App steps. And then we ask you to connect your Naviance and your Common App accounts. And this really becomes the language and how we send your materials. All of the materials that will come from our office, our transcript, our letter of recommendation, and the teachers' letters of recommendation as well, they all go through Naviance. So we asked you to connect your Common App and Naviance accounts so the two systems speak to one another. And you'll be able to view a video demonstration of these steps. It's pretty straightforward. Beyond that, we asked you to then sort of go through the transcript request process. And there are a couple of things that you're going to do simply one time in this process, and there are some other things that we'll need you to continue to update as the process moves along. This transcript release authorization is actually one of the things you have to do one time. And this asks students and families to sign off saying that you will allow Medfield High School to release your transcript to the colleges that you're applying to. And it also asks to make sure that you have actually reviewed the transcript that was sent to you and that it looks accurate. This is something, this form is a Google form, and it was posted in your guidance Google Classroom. You guys all will have access to it. It was posted a little bit earlier today. So you'll have the opportunity to fill this out once and then be completely done with this part of the process. Beyond that, in order to actually request your transcripts, so we'll have you complete that, and then we need to make sure that the communication is open between us. So, and the communication really happens through, verbal conversations with you, through emails, but also through the information that you're putting into both Common App and into Naviance. So we ask students, make sure that you're keeping your Common App colleges section updated with the schools that you're planning on applying to. And then in Naviance, if there are schools that you're applying to that don't use the Common Application, we ask that you add those schools directly into your Naviance account. There's a section called Colleges I'm Applying To, and you can easily search the names of schools and input them. As you do that in your Naviance screen, we want you to make sure that you're keeping us very much up to date with how you're applying to the schools. Are you applying as an early decision candidate, an early action candidate, regular decision, or rolling? What that application deadline is, and how you're planning on applying to the college. Are you using a common application, or are you submitting an application directly to the institution? So those are things that we need to have that open communication with you in order for us to submit your information properly to the schools. This sounds clunky and heavy sort of as I'm saying it, and probably as you're reading it on a screen. it actually isn't as difficult as it sounds. We will have in your Google Classroom a document with screenshots for exactly how you walk through all of these steps, posted in the next couple of days. It will be labeled college application instructions. But again, we're also very, very happy to have these conversations one-on-one with students through virtual meetings or any other meetings at any point along the way. The one other part that's important to keep in mind is that we want to make sure that we are getting all of the information to the colleges that you're applying to by their application deadlines. So we have deadlines on our end to ensure that we're able to do the things on our end, like write your letter of recommendation and prepare materials to be sent with plenty of time. So we ask that you have completed a transcript request form. It's a Google form, and you've added your information into Common App and Naviance at least 1 month before your earliest application deadline. So for example, if your earliest application deadline is November 1st, we ask that by October 1st, you've filled out the transcript request Google form, and your colleges with their accurate deadlines, the way you're applying, and all of that information is updated in both Common App and Naviance. Later on, if you choose to add additional schools to the list that you're applying to, that's great. We're happy to do that at any point in the process. We just want to make sure that you guys have communicated that to us as well. Naviance will send us an email if you have requested your transcript, but we're asking for that extra communication from you as well with an email or verbal communication somehow at least 48 hours in advance of the application deadline. We want to make sure that we have plenty of time to get the materials off. So for example, November 1st this year is on a Sunday. So Halloween is on a Saturday. We actually don't have school on that Friday, right? So we really want to make sure that we have enough opportunity to get the things done that are important in this process. So making sure that we're communicating on a regular basis is going to be really important. And before we move on from this one little piece right here, I just want to mention, if students have October 15th application deadlines, obviously that 1 month deadline is today, right? That's okay. We're sharing this information with you guys today. Would simply ask that we are in communication with you by the end of the week so that we have an opportunity to prepare your materials in time for that October 15th deadline.
All right, so for the recommendation request process, this would include your teacher and your counselor. I'm going to give you an overview here for the teacher recommendation. That being said, we do not expect you to remember all of these steps. And just like Mrs. Lodge was saying, it looks very involved when you see it up on the screen with all these steps here. But when you actually log into Naviance, that's how you'll be requesting your teacher letter. Officially, once you've spoken with your teacher, when you log in, this request process, this clicking will only take you probably 1 minute. And our goal is for you to have the overview now, but then when you sit down to actually make that request, that you can reference this handout, which we'll have available for you in the Google Classroom, and have it just walk you through the steps quickly. So please don't feel like you need to remember these now, but just as a quick overview, you'll log into your Naviance account. You'll have all of your colleges listed in the colleges I'm applying to section. And then there's an area about letters of recommendation. So you can add the request, right there, and select the teacher who you've already spoken with about providing a letter for you. One important thing to note is that if you have asked more than one teacher for a letter, it's really important that you be specific when you go into Naviance about which colleges you want which teacher to send to. The reason for that is every college has a cap on the number of letters of recommendation they will accept. And so, for example, if you have a college that only accepts one letter and you have two teachers writing for you and you want, let's say, your science teacher to send it, you want to be sure that you've noted that for the science teacher so that the other teacher doesn't send first. So again, just being specific when you get in there and follow these steps. The other thing to note about teacher letters of recommendation is just that more isn't necessarily better. So you do want to be mindful when you're looking at each college's application requirements of how many teacher letters they are asking for. So if they are asking for 2 and you send 5, doesn't necessarily reflect well on your end. So this is not a case of more is better. You really want to be mindful of what that college is asking for, and send that specific number. So our next slide here is about sometimes students will send or have an outside person offer to write them a letter of recommendation, like a coach or an employer. If this is the case for you or something you've considered, the first thing you want to do is check your college's individual websites to see if they will accept the letter. So some colleges have rules about, for example, we'll accept a letter from an employer or a coach, but not from a family member. Some say they will not accept outside letters of recommendation at all, whereas others will. So the first thing you want to do is check the college's website, see if they will accept it. If the answer is yes, there are 2 ways that that outside individual can submit for you. So the first is that you can log into your Common Application account and send them an invitation, and they can submit right through Common App. And the second way is they can just go the old-fashioned route of mailing a hard copy letter directly to the college, in which case you should offer to give them a stamped and addressed envelope just to make it easy. And then for your counselor letter of recommendation. So we talked about this last year, and so this is just a reminder that if you haven't already, we ask that you please log into Naviance and click on that counselor letter of recommendation form. This is an opportunity for you to highlight information about yourself that you may like us to include in your letter. So it's a good chance for you to give us some background so that we can really write a thoughtful and comprehensive letter for you. If you have forgotten how to get to the letter, we've got a screenshot right there, but it's right into the in Naviance About Me on the top and into my surveys.
Hi, folks. I'm going to talk a little bit now about the Common Application. The Common App has been very consistent through the years with subtle tweaks each school season. One of the best recommendations that I can give you is the help guide that is listed here on the slide for first-time students. Many students may have already set up their Common Application account. For those that haven't, it's a good to do over the course of the next couple of weeks. And one of the best features that Common App started offering us in the last few years was the opportunity for students to invite advisors. And I just got my first invitation from one of my students last week. And what this does is it allows for students, it allows for the advisor to be able to see a PDF version of the Common App. All the biographical information, short answers, essays. It's so much better as a guidance counselor to be able to look at that PDF form and give feedback than having a student try to go through each specific section on the Common App. So we do plan on offering some type of virtual Common App help sessions in the future. But for students to be able to at least begin that account now and open it up and start to answer some of the questions is a great first step. A lot of the questions that are asked on the Common App, we put here. We get emails from the students all the time about, you know, what's the school code, what's the actual day of the graduate, how big is the class. So all that information is shared here. This is stuff that, again, it's a lot of the Common App. The great thing about the Common App is you fill it out once and you can use it for, I think there's over 400 schools that utilize it. And some of the questions are very specific to the high school and specific to the kid. So these are some of the questions that get asked all the time, and this is good information for the students to have. These are the counselor names and email and the phone numbers. It's the craziest question on Common App. What is your guidance counselor's job title? Guidance counselor. But again, that's why we've tried to centrally locate this information so students can have a kind of a grab and go approach here as they sit down to fill this out. More information that's asked on the Common App is our GPA scale, which is a 4.0 scale. Students that take honors and AP courses are given a 0.8 bump. So when you do look at your transcripts, and I believe transcripts were sent to seniors last week, you're going to have 2 GPAs listed on your transcript. A weighted GPA, which again gives 0.8 bump to each honors and AP course that you take, and an unweighted GPA, which is all of your courses combined over the 3 years that you've been at Medfield High School, based on the 4.0 scale with no weight given. A lot of students will say, well, which GPA should I send? If you've taken honors in AP and your weighted GPA is higher than your unweighted GPA and you can only report one, we would recommend that you report the weighted one. That being said, there are a number of colleges and universities that will recalculate GPAs on their own scale and system, and some schools won't. So that's why we provide both on the transcript, so schools will see both of them. Medfield does not rank students, so you can list that as none, and we have a semester scheduling system. Could you go to that next slide, Mrs. Worthley? There we go. Thank you.
Mrs. Lodge, was there a question?
Yes. So Mr. Ornberg, one of the questions in here is there any chance that we'll do an ACT school day too?
Yeah, last February, we had our last ACT sitting, and this was decided pre-COVID. Unfortunately, the ACT has added an electronic internet-based part of the script, and we felt that Medfield High School, unfortunately, with some of the internet that goes in and out, to be able to do that on a Saturday without the right support in place would be a little bit too risky. So we decided collectively that we were going to continue to offer the paper-based pre-ACT, but that we weren't going to offer the ACT sitting moving forward.
Great, thank you. Stephanie, can you go to the next slide? Thank you. So I know that we just threw a lot of information at you, but I do want to remind everybody that all of this will be in the Google Classroom for the senior class. So most of you joined this last year, but if you haven't joined the Google Classroom, here's the code. And this is a really great place to start as you're working through your Common Application or as you're trying to request your transcripts. If you can't remember exactly what the steps are or exactly how you should answer certain questions on the Common App, check the Google Classroom first, because more likely than not, the information will be there on different how-to documents that we'll post there. So make sure that you're joined there and refer to it often. Excellent. I want to let everyone know about an additional type of application called the Coalition application, which you may have heard of. So it's an alternative to the Common Application that about 150 colleges use. Virginia Tech, University of Florida, and University of Washington are the 3 schools that only use the Coalition app. The other colleges will typically also use the Common Application. We usually recommend that if your schools all use the Common App, to just use the Common App. That way you're just filling out one application for all of your schools. But if you are applying to one of these 3, then certainly using the Coalition app is fine. You will complete the transcript request process the exact same way as if you were using the Common App or a school-specific application, so that doesn't change, but we just wanted to make sure that you knew what the Coalition application is. And another type of application, which some of you may have noticed, others maybe you haven't, that's okay, is called a VIP or fast track application. So sometimes a college or university will send an email directly to a student inviting them to apply as a VIP applicant or fast track applicant, and that they can apply through a link that's provided in that email. It's absolutely fine if you don't receive one of these emails. It doesn't mean that you're not VIP or a special applicant. Oftentimes they send these emails out if a student, let's say, had visited that school's table at a college fair and signed in, or had visited campus at one point. So there's different ways why students might receive this VIP application, but just know that if you don't, that's fine. And if you do, and you decide to apply as this VIP applicant, just to make sure that you tell your guidance counselor, because we'll have to send your transcript in a different way. So again, if you're applying through a special link that is sent out, just let your guidance counselor know. We'll make sure to get your materials there correctly.
Thanks, Amanda. So I just wanted to make sure that we kind of had a quick review of different admission deadlines and talk about early decision agreement as well. So we went over this information with students and parents in December at our junior parent night and in classrooms, and kind of reviewed it again in May. But I know sometimes the decisions can be a little tricky to remember. So our regular decision students are applying for admissions at a regular deadline, usually like January 1st, January 15th, and we'll hear their response from their colleges in the spring, March or April. At this point, what we're really talking about in the fall here is early action and early decision. So you may be applying to a school that has both, for example. So an early action deadline is a non-binding agreement. So you apply early, let's say to UMass Amherst by November 1st, you hear back in 6 to 8 weeks, usually before the end of the year. You still don't have to make your decision about where you're attending until May 1st. Early decision is the one I really want to highlight today. Typically, we have very few students apply early decision every year, but it's just important to note that this is a binding agreement, a commitment between you and the college that if you're accepted early decision to a school, that you will attend there. So when going through this application process, you'll see when you go into your common application, you have to indicate if you're applying early decision. If you are, there's a place for you to check off, I think, and sign your name that you understand that if you are accepted, you will attend. It allows you to also input your parents' email address. They will receive a link as well that they sign off that they understand that as well. Your guidance counselor also needs to sign off on this form. So this is important because your guidance counselor does not get notification about the ED agreement until after you and your parent both have electronically signed the form in Common App. So oftentimes, as we've talked about the transcript request, you may fill out the Google form, request your transcript in Naviance, and kind of not think about it again. And I totally understand that, except if you have an ED agreement, you have to let us know that so that way we can be sure to go back into Naviance after you and your parents have both signed off on the ED agreement so we can sign off as well. So again, it's just an extra step and something to think about kind of moving through this process. One of the other things, and additional information to think about is if you are planning on playing a sport, college athletics, you have to sign up with the NCAA Clearinghouse. There's a lot of information here about eligibility. The NCAA that announced that they will have some flexibility this year around test scores and so forth related to eligibility. So I think it's important if you are considering playing a sport at the college level to check out this article here and talk to your guidance counselor about what the expectations are for that as well. I want to assure everybody that we are here to help and support you. We want you to take a deep breath through this process, know that we are available to you. On the days that you're in school, we will be here. We can certainly set up individual appointments and meetings. I think that might be easier to do on the days that on your hybrid days at your home, but we are gonna work through this whole process together. I think one of the things, from our office, we really miss seeing students. So it'll be great to see some of you and have these conversations. We were talking earlier today how, school's starting a little bit later this year, but the November 1st deadlines aren't any later. So this is definitely on the forefront of our minds and a priority that we have over the next couple weeks to get get letters of recommendations done, to work with you guys to make sure everything is done in a timely fashion. And I'd like to ask if there were any questions popping up.
Sure. There are a number of people who are still a little bit confused about the SAT cancellation and whether or not whether they're automatically registered for the October 14th, if they were previously registered for the October 3rd, and if not, what they need to do in order to make that happen. We did send an email home to families, but Mr. Ornberg, can you just talk us through that process one more time?
Sure. So just to clarify, and I did try to type some responses in the questions below about this. If you registered for the October 3rd SAT, our recommendation is that you call them about a refund, and I would push College Board for this. They told us they were going to give refunds to people if testing sites closed due to COVID or other reasons. You can call College Board to transfer from October to a November or December sitting. Being registered for the October 3rd SATs in Medfield does not transfer to the October 14th SAT school day. That's a completely different situation. And the best way I can put it is, I'm assuming most folks on here are seniors. Last year, when your juniors signed up for the PSAT, they signed up through AP Test Services, our website, where you would go on and you would pay to register and put in SSD numbers if need be. It's the same process this year. The link will be provided to folks. I think I put it in the chat here, where you will log on there, you will register, and you will pay. You do not register through College Board for the October 14th SAT school day. That is done completely through Medfield. And the answer sheet that students fill out on October 14th will act as the actual registration form.
Thank you, Mr. Ornberg. Just a few other questions. One, do guidance counselors see teachers' letters of recommendation before they are submitted to colleges? I'm happy to take that one. We do not. So teachers send their letters independently through Naviance, but the guidance counselors do not have access to the letters of recommendation from the teachers. Another question about applications. For early applications, either early decision or early action, should a student think differently about that this year? In other words, is there any advantage or disadvantage to applying early this year relative to other years?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think that there are a lot of unknowns this year. I think that's always a question that comes up every year about, is there an advantage to applying early decision? And we always encourage parents and students to, ask admissions counselors about their statistics and data for, if I apply early, how many students are, accepted in their early decision and early action pool. I think this year is a completely different year than any other. It's hard to know exactly what the answer is. And I would say, it's important to have these conversations around the dinner table with your sons and daughters about what that looks like if they do apply early decision to a school. My hope is by next fall, colleges are back up and running like normal, but it's so hard to know. And even the webinars we've been on and admissions counselors we've reached out to, a lot of the answers are that they don't know yet either. So I think that's a really hard question to say, but an important conversation to have as a family.
Great, thank you. Another question around testing. Should we pay to have existing test scores sent to colleges, or is self-reporting okay? I'm happy to jump on this one too. I think, again, that's a great question. It's going to be very college specific. Again, most colleges are test optional, but they should have clearly communicated their information to you on their admission webpage. When in doubt, navigate to their admission webpage and look for information there. For some schools, if they still do require testing, occasionally those schools will allow you to self-report the scores right through Common App, but some colleges historically have required that official test scores be sent from College Board or ACT. I would suspect that with more and more colleges test optional this year, some of that will likely be a bit relaxed. But again, I would to confirm, I would really make sure that you're looking at the admission web pages for every school that you're planning on applying to. Another question here, is the NCAA clearinghouse an absolute requirement, or can direct communication with college coaches take the place of that?
I'm happy to jump on that. The NCAA clearinghouse is a requirement for students playing or pursuing Division I or Division II athletics. I would encourage you strongly to reach out to the coach who is recruiting your child and ask them what specifically they need in terms of the NCAA clearinghouse. Sue Curtis is our secretary. She is usually, once she gets the request to upload transcripts to the NCAA clearinghouse and board scores, which can be sent directly, Sue takes care of that. But I would have the entry point would be to talk to the coach who is recruiting your child to see what exactly they're going to need.
Great, thank you. Another SAT question, if the SAT testing is canceled, does that include the SAT test subjects as well? So the answer to that would be yes. If you are registered at Medfield High School for the October 3rd test, the entire SAT and SAT subject tests are canceled for that day. Students have the option of registering for the school day SAT on that October 14th date. However, we are not able to offer subject tests on that day. If you were signed up to take the subject test, you can contact College Board and look to transfer your registration to a November test date or reschedule. Along those same lines, there are very, very few colleges that require SAT subject tests. So it might be worth looking into the schools that you're interested in first before making that decision as to whether or not it's worth your time to reschedule those subject tests. There is a question here. Is there any insight on whether students from the class of 2020 who may have deferred their admission and taken a year off will impact available slots for the class of 2021? Again, another great, great question. Does anyone, I'm happy to jump on it, but does anyone else want to dive in? Okay, I'll dive in. I would just say that based on the webinars that we have attended and in speaking with college admission representatives, they don't know yet. From what I'm hearing, a lot of their classes this year, it's still kind of settling out as more schools have gone fully remote, what things look like even for their current class and how that's going to impact things moving forward for them. So they don't know what that's going to look like even in terms of their own early decision or early application pool. Are students still going to be applying early like they have in past years, or are things going to look a little bit different because the future is so unclear and how things are going to play out over the next year? So at this point, we really don't know, and neither do they. I'm sure we'll get updated information as the year progresses, but at this point, I would sort of recommend to families, go about your plan as what makes the most sense for you as a family and where you or your child wants to apply, what schools might be great fits for them. And we're going to continue to see things shift over the next year. Let me see, I'm just quickly scrolling through other questions here. There is a question here, when will the scores for the October 14th SAT be released? Will they be in time to submit for the November 1st application deadline?
I can answer that one, Mrs. Lodge. I was told by College Board that scores would be released the first week in November. And I don't want to get too deep into the weeds here with folks, but I will say that if you're taking the SAT and you want to submit it, and you take the school based on October 14th and are applying November 1st, continue to apply. Those scores can be sent directly from College Board past the November 1st deadline. Just like term 1 grades that usually don't come out until November, sometimes near Thanksgiving, they will simply add that to the file if your child's application file is open and you've paid the admissions fee. So even though they may not come out until the first week of November, they can still be included in an early action or early decision deadline of November 1st or 15th. And to follow up on that, I see a question in there about why Medfield is not listed on the October 3rd date as being canceled. This did just happen in the last 24 hours, so they may not have updated it, but we have received confirmation that the request was put through to cancel on October 3rd, and I would trust that. That's why we try to get that information in the newsletter and in preparation for today's presentation.
Thank you. One additional question. When asking for a teacher recommendation letter, is there a limit to what teacher you ask? Does it have to be a junior year teacher, a sophomore year teacher, or a freshman year? It's a great question.
I can jump on this one. So we typically recommend that the most important element for a teacher writing a letter is that they've really gotten a chance to know you and see you working hard as a student. So it's important to keep in mind, I think sometimes students feel like, oh, I need to ask a teacher that, you know, I did really well in their class and I got an A+. That's definitely not the case. What's most important is that you worked hard. And in terms of when you should have had them, historically it's been, we recommend junior year because they've most recently seen you as a student. I think, you know, given the circumstances of last year, it may be worth considering opening up to sophomore year as well. If there's a teacher you've had more than once, they can be a really great option, but we usually try to stick with a teacher you've had recently. So typically not freshman year unless you've had them again during sophomore or ideally junior year.
Great, thank you, Mrs. DeLuzio. It looks like those are all of the questions that have been posted in the chat. Oh, I take that back. Looks like there's one more. If you apply in November but don't have your test scores, do you have to say that you are sending scores, or can you apply with no scores and then send them if you feel they will help? Another great question.
I think just to answer that, I think that's completely, a lot of kids have played that strategy of I'm going to wait and see and then decide whether or not I want to send them. The only hiccup potentially in that is if you wait until November 1st to 5th when the scores come out and then decide, it may be another 2 to 3 weeks to be able to send them from College Board. I'm not sure how quickly College Board gets those scores in the hands of college admissions offices. They're usually in the hands of kids within 2 to 3 weeks. They've gotten very good about that in terms of efficiency. But if you decide to wait and then decide to send your scores, that may add 2 or 3 weeks. That being said, you could still individually report your scores, a self-report, quote unquote self-report. A lot of college admissions departments have a very basic @admissions email address that students and counselors can send information. That is checked and monitored daily, and some information will be accepted through those means. So if you are in a pinch, you could always send an unofficial copy of those scores once you decide whether or not you think they're going to help the application process.
Thanks, Eric. So I think we went over a lot of information, and as we said, we're going to post all of this, but I think the most important kind of takeaway from this is it's important to make an appointment with your guidance counselor in the next couple weeks. I would say within a week, we're going to send out information about how to actually do that. For students that are on right now, you know how all of your guidance counselors have a reading period sign-up sheet right outside their door. You could come down and sign up for a reading period. Unfortunately, we can't do that this year. We are going to offer an online kind of appointment booking system where you can go right in and make an appointment for yourself. Parents, if you want to set up a time to meet with guidance counselors as well, I think it's really helpful to have a parent, the student, and guidance counselor all together having those conversations. Just shoot us an email. We can find a time in the next couple weeks to have those conversations. They're important ones. I know for the students and also for us as well. So again, the big takeaways today: communication is key in this whole process. Know that we're here to help. And when you have questions, just reach out. So again, thank you so much for taking the time to do this today. And we look forward to working with you throughout the next year. Thanks very much for coming. Bye-bye.